Hello everyone, how's it going? My name is Elias, and in today's video we're going to be talking about all the books I've recently read. So I have a total number of 8 books I want to talk about with you guys today. And oh boy, there's a lot of range, I think, in this pile because I have some favorites and I have, for the first time of 2021, sort of like a 1.5 star read. We'll get into that. It was, oh my god. Okay, I would say that in the past couple of months, since this is in March, I feel like February so far has been a really great reading month. That's where most of the books that I've read come into play. I honestly haven't read a single book yet for the month of March, and it's been, what, a week already? I know that I've been seeing a lot of other booktubers who are reading like 10 to 15 books a month, and I'm just like, please give me some of your power. But honestly, if you can't even read a book even a month, that's totally fine. There isn't a set minimum or maximum limit of books where you have to read or reach for that particular month. You do you. It's just, personally for me, I feel more accomplished, more productive if I get to read at least 3 to 4 books a month is probably the goal that I have. It's easily doable in my opinion because that's basically a book a week if you really think about it. So before we get started talking about the books, I would like to thank today's video sponsor, Book of the Month. So for the past, I believe like 4 months now, I've been working with Book of the Month. I absolutely love them. They are a super fast, popular online growing service for readers. Basically, their mission is to vet through hundreds of books so you can spend more time reading and less time researching. They have 2 wonderful aspects that I love about them. The first one being is they're risk-free, meaning if you're not vibing with that particular month, if you're not really interested in that current selection of books, no problem. You literally can skip that particular month and you won't be charged. And the second best thing is they're priced for new released hardcover fiction. So if you're interested, you can use the code BOOKBUD to get your first book for only $9.99. So with that being said, we can check out the books for their March picks. Firstly, we have What's Mine and Yours, a literary fiction about multi-generational families divided in a southern community. Next, In a Book Club Far Away, a contemporary fiction about estranged friends reconnecting to heal past wounds. Thirdly, the final revival of Opal and Nev, a historical fiction about rock and roll and black feminist punk spirit. Next, we have a historical fantasy, The Lost Apothecary, that specializes in one thing: helping women fight back. Lastly, we have Too Good to Be True, a psychological thriller about secrets, lies, and truths. Alright, so these are all the book picks for the month of March. Thank you to Book of the Month for sponsoring today's video, and with that being said, let's go ahead and get straight into the wrap-up. So I won't be going in order for the books that I read, but I will be talking about all the books within that particular month, starting with January. So in January, my first book of 2021, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. This one was interesting because I've heard so many great things about it prior before going in, and this was the January pick for the Late Night Book Club. Honestly, I vastly enjoyed it. It was great. The writing style was fantastic. It had my sort of style. It's very aesthetic, very flowery, poignant, and very beautiful, and that's pretty much the only thing that I had going for this book, because everything else, especially the main character, it felt very flat for me. The only person here I probably would vibe with would probably be the main love interest. He's a cinnamon roll. I love that. Essentially, this girl, she makes a pact with the devil where she wants to live her own life, basically to break free from the hold and the conformity of society. She hates the patriarchy and she's like,
I don't see it. Please, let me live my own life.
and so the devil's like,
Alright.
peace. So she's basically immortal. However, every person that she meets forgets about her. Bummer, right? So fast forward all the way to New York City. She goes into a bookshop where she meets a boy who remembers her name. So honestly, what did we really think about that premise? Fantastic. 10 out of 10. So good, right? No. I feel like there were so many other ways, better ways, that V.E. Schwab could have taken this story and its characters in a completely better, different direction. Instead, we're following this girl, this white girl, as she travels to all of these places: China, Spain, Beijing, living throughout this history. However, we never really get to see that at all. This book, honestly, is more of a show and tell, which I really, really dislike in books. I really dislike it when the author just tells us a bunch of these things without ever showing it. I want to see and read about Addie going to these places, interacting with these people and its culture. We're basically stuck in white and Eurocentric places such as France, Germany, and New York. That's it for the entirety of its book, when it's mentioned that Addie has lived such a full and rich life, experienced so many different cultures, meeting different people, but we really never got to see that. It was more just mentioned, and that was basically it. I feel like the only prominent character of color that I remember in this book is probably the best friend, who is black, and that's basically it. But honestly, if you're even more curious to hear more of my thoughts, I discuss this book in full length and detail with my other co-hosts, Noel and Joel, on a live show. So you guys can check that out if you guys want to hear all of our thoughts about it. Overall, a 3 out of 5. I feel like it's just a simple, pretty story with pretty writing and pretty petty characters. So take with that as you will. All right, the next book, The Shining by Stephen King. This is my second book that I've read from Stephen King, the first one being The Outsider, which I actually really enjoyed. So this one I actually read for, oh wait, my bad. So this is actually the January book pick for January. The Secret Life of Addie LaRue was for December, but our live show was in January. Makes sense now. I can see why it's a classic, a horror classic that a lot of people really love and would recommend. I'm glad that I read it, and comparing it to Stephen's later work, I would definitely say I prefer probably his later books, but I've only read one of his first early books, so who knows, we'll see. Ultimately, I gave this book a 3 out of 5. It wasn't terrifying by any means, but I don't think that's the main takeaway. It's more of a deeper, closer look on the abuse of alcohol, family dynamics, and the struggles between a married couple. I feel like those things played out really well in this book. The horror aspect just added that extra layer, that extra oomph to carry the story forward, and overall I really liked it. However, the main things I did not like about this book, I get it. I get that this book takes place, I don't know, during the early 70s or 80s, I forgot. But the use of the N-word and its depiction of women and characters of color. Honestly, there's only one character of color in here, and he was black, and how Stephen portrayed him in some parts of the book just didn't sit well with me. Other than that, overall, not too bad. Would I recommend this? Yeah, for sure. I feel like it's like one of those classics that everyone knows and everyone talks about, sort of like Frankenstein or Dracula, but also keeping in mind and acknowledging the problems that this book also has. So, all right, so moving on into February. The next book, Electric Kingdom by David Arnold. This book was a huge surprise for me. This is one of the better books in this pile that I have vastly enjoyed and was surprised by. I feel like this book in of itself will be super underrated. So honestly, listen to me. If you trust my recommendations, I, Elias, would recommend this book to you. So personally for me as a reader, I don't typically dive into a lot of dystopian, apocalyptic, or sci-fi books as much. But thanks to this book, that is going to change because this book was just so poignant and lyrical and beautiful in the way that it was written and how it was structured and its characters and the story that it's telling. And this is YA. And that doesn't mean it's any lesser than any other book in any other genre. This was such a different take from what I was expecting. I was expecting sort of like Hunger Games, Divergence, Scythe sort of feel, sort of the vibe, the structure that it would tell the story, you know, teenagers saving the world, falling in love. But at its core, it isn't really about that. It's just about people in general trying to find beauty in the world that they're living in, either through its exploration of arts, of what it means to be human, of interacting with each other in general, and found family, which is a trope if you like, this book has it. I would say that this book is more like Middle Game by Sean McGuire meets John Green without the pretentious aspects of it. This book in of itself is very metaphorical. It's philosophical in the way it sort of tells its stories. So it's very layered, I think, which may sound complex, but it actually isn't. I actually did a whole reading vlog for this book, so you guys can check that out if you guys are interested. So a big 4 out of 5 for this book for me. It was just so quiet and unassuming, but yet so utterly profound. This was like a panoramic view of looking through a kaleidoscope, a small kaleidoscope, but you're just looking at something bigger and brighter than you were expecting. I highly recommend this book and thoroughly enjoyed it. Okay, so the next book I'm going to talk about is Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This was our March pick for the Late Night Book Club, and we just actually had a live show over on Joel's channel, so you guys can check that out. My final rating for this book is a 3 out of 5. I feel like there were so many split discussions and agreements, almost polarizing, on how people felt about this book. There are different aspects on what people liked and what they didn't, and I'll get into that. So this book is actually a thriller, and judging from the cover, I would have never guessed it was. Am I glad I read this book? Heck yeah, 10 out of 10, 100%. I feel like this is a really important book with its message and its story that a lot of young readers can learn and take away from. So a couple of the aspects that a lot of people did not like about this book was its thriller aspect, and I tend to agree. You know, for most of YA thrillers in general, they just tend not to stick it for me anymore. They're really unbelievable in the way that they write these characters and its story and its mystery. However, the aspect that I wholeheartedly 100% agree with this book is that the situation the main character is in, it's 100% a reality and relevant in today's society regarding how men sexualize and prey on young girls, especially on young black girls. This was at times a really hard read because you're reading about a grown man basically grooming and gaslighting, manipulating this young underage girl. So of all the discussions that we had for the Late Night Book Club, this was one of my favorites. I prefer my books and its messages to be more subtle than heavy-handed, but that's not to say that other readers won't take any less than from the story and its characters and its message. I just had small minor problems with the book, sort of like the writing style. I wish that some characters were fleshed out and more story aspects from the present, because the story is told sort of in 2 parts, past and present. I wish I could have read more from the problems that this character had to face in the present. So other than that, a good, solid rate, 3 out of 5. Alright, the next book is Night of the Mannequins by Stephen Graham Jones. This is a really short novella following a group of teenagers playing a prank on their friend at a movie theater that involves a mannequin. And that's basically all I'm going to say what this book is about, because this book is like around 130 pages, so I feel like it's a very easy read to get through. However, I don't know where, but regarding the information about this book in general, I feel like I was misled on what the entirety of this book was about. It went into a different direction than I thought. It wasn't anything bad per se. It wasn't something that I was expecting. I was like, okay, it didn't really go to its full potential. I feel like maybe this would have been better if it was fleshed out more. The writing really disconnected me from the book in general. I get that we're reading in the head and the voice of a teenager. This didn't feel like reading from a head of a teenager. I felt like I was reading a jumbled mess from the mind of like a 10-year-old. However, this was an actually full-fledged teenager formulating these thoughts with these actions that have consequences. But when I was reading through all this, I felt like I was reading a 10-year-old. It was just so weird. The writing wasn't my cup of tea, and the ending, I feel like I was so confused. I actually had to reread sort of parts of the book to fully understand. Ultimately, I'm going to say this. I don't like it when mental illness is portrayed sort of as a base or an explanation to why as a character did this or think that. I know that some people are okay with it when it's done correctly or in a better light. For me personally, it just never sits well with me in general. I'm not going to go too much into detail in case you guys want to read this. I don't think there's anything super problematic or harmful about it. It's just personally for me, I don't vibe with it, or agree. Other than that, I'm giving this a 2 out of 5. I am still very interested in reading other books that the author has written, so hopefully his other books are better. So the next book I want to talk about is Real Life by Brandon Taylor. So this was a really slow and captivating read. To me, this book was a really important look on how people of color, specifically Black and Indigenous people of color, are subjugated to the white gaze. And what I mean by that is, in a white setting, we have to try to work harder in presenting how we talk, the way we look, or what we're doing, specifically in a work setting. I feel like it's a double-edged sword. If we're not seen as putting much of an effort, we're seen as lazy or lesser than our white colleagues. However, if you're overworking or working too much or too hard, you're seen as tryhards and ass kissers. Several aspects of this also apply to everybody just in general, but just the fine line, the fine details of it, I think is a really important look at that aspect. When a person of color brings the word racism up, white people would tend to take that word, put it underneath a microscope, and fully analyze and theorize and just really look at it fine line to see if it really is racist or if it was something just over exaggerated and they just couldn't take a joke. Just something along the lines like that, and this book really explored that aspect. This was a really slow-paced book. Granted, its story only takes place during the course of a weekend. This is about a young gay Black man studying in a predominantly white setting in a Midwestern university. This was about expressing oneself, self-identity, and how people handle grief in different ways. So I would definitely recommend this book. I really enjoyed it. I listened to an audio. I think that really helps me, going through this book. The writing in this book was fucking amazing. It was so beautiful in the way that it just flows throughout the entire story. Overall, I just wish there was more from the story. This is a really character-driven book, especially with its characters and their backstories. There isn't much plot. I feel like there's no plot at all in this book because it's almost like a slice of life. Small, quiet, yet vital story about race and its exploration of identity. So a strong 3 out of 5 for me. Alright, so the next book I want to talk about, On Earth, We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Wong. I fucking love this book. This book, oh my fucking god. I honestly have no words or feelings to describe everything that I felt for this book. This book was just beautiful, heartbreaking, perfect in every way. This sort of reads like a fictional memoir and autobiographical about a Vietnamese man who writes a letter to his mother who can't read. This basically details his upbringing as a son of an immigrant coming to America and dealing with racial prejudice and its issues, generational trauma, as well as an exploration of self-identity, masculinity, and sexuality. I can't even begin to describe how fantastic the writing style is in this book. When I say I like beautiful writing, that in of itself is like really basic, surface level. Ocean Wong is fucking talented. The reason why I'm emphasizing this so hardcore is because literally every line, every sentence in this book is done with deliberate intention. However, it doesn't feel that way. It's not heavy-handed. It's like the feeling, the knowing that you're walking on thin, cracked glass without seeing any of the cracks. It was just so fragile and powerful all at the same time. This book is also being made into an A24 film. I can't wait. I can't wait. I don't know what I have to do or who I have to sell my soul to in order to be a part of this movie. Please. But this book is just phenomenal at its finest. Like, finest writing, finest story crafting, finest everything. Fuck, I love it so much. 10 out of 10. Highly, definitely recommend. And this book isn't even that long. Honestly, this book is less than 250 pages long. So if you're down to read 250 pages of perfection, you're okay with gaining 250 years added to your lifespan, go fucking read this book. 10 out of 10. Alright, so now we have come to the end of this video where I'll be talking about the absolute worst trash book I've read so far this year. So this book was so fucking dumb. I actually lost brain cells reading this. It might come off as a little harsh and, dramatic, maybe a little over-exaggerated, but at its core, this is essentially all my feels and all my thoughts regarding this particular book. So I don't have the book because I borrowed it from the library. And the reason why I borrowed it from the library was because I've been seeing like fan art and all of these tweets saying how great this book is, how fun and great experience that they all had reading this book. The fan art looked really interesting. All the things that I read sounded really promising. So after moving and getting settled in, I was like, I just need a really fun fantasy book to read right now, just to pass the time and whatever. So thanks to Twitter and its incredibly high Goodreads rating, I picked this book up. This fucking book is Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. If you're already coming from my Goodreads, you already know that this was coming. So honestly, I cannot even tell you what this book is about because there's essentially no fucking plot. I need to calm down. But it's essentially about a young girl, a maiden. She's basically the chosen one. And she meets this guy who's her personal bodyguard. Essentially throughout the whole book, they're horny and angsty for each other. The end. That's it. Of course, there are other details regarding, mystery, plot, excitement, whatever. But that's not what I'm discussing here today. I'm discussing the way that this book has a huge, highest rating of, at the time that I read this, a 4.36, which I think is incredibly high for any book. I saw all these good 4 or 5 star reviews. Like everyone was just praising the characters, the story, the romance. This book won the Goodreads Choice Award for the category of romance. I am confusion. How in the world did this YA book compete against these other books? I was just so flabbergasted and surprised at how this book even won, because the romance in this book? Y'all, this review will probably be all over the place, but essentially, when I was reading it, in the first 30 pages, I was like, oof, this is gonna be fucking rough. Hopefully it'll pick up, maybe like in the middle, it'll take off there. But no. Throughout the entirety of the book, when I was reading it, I was just mind-blown how god-awful this book was. Granted, I'm probably not the right demographic for it anymore, the right audience. You might enjoy this book, and hey, you can give this book a 10 out of 10, and that's totally great. That's your own personal review. Like I said before, I was reading like 30 pages, and I was like, alright, let me give you the general gist of what I predicted was going to happen in this book. I even wrote it down. Maiden sneaks off, Maiden meets Hot Dude somehow becomes her personal bodyguard, Castle is attacked, Hot Dude and Maiden get summoned to Capital, Hot Dude and Maiden have sex, betrayal ensues, secrets revealed, cliffhanger, the end. 30 pages in, that is what I predicted. And without giving you any spoilers, that's all I'm gonna say. Okay, going back to the romance, there was this part in the book where they're really going at it, okay? They're really horny for each other, super angsty, giving seductive eye looks across the room. Just so much heat and passion, but they're going at it, right? And the guy comes down on her, and he tells her, you taste like honeydew. Honeydew? Why? I eat honeydew all the time. Now I would never look at honeydew ever the same. Even in the Goodreads comments, 5 stars, they're like emphasizing honeydew. And I'm like, no. Why? Yeah, I don't know. Why honeydew? He also calls her Princess as a pet name the entire book. And in the book, they're also like older. The girl is supposedly 18. The guy is like, I don't know, 20, in his early 20s, 21, 20 something. I have never seen 2 grown-ups talk like this, the way that they do in this book. It was just so bad and cringe-inducing to me that at the end of the book, I had to vomit all of that out. All of that cringe, all of that angst, because I could not take it. Also, the main love interest. So many people love him. And yeah, sure, on a surface level, I can see why. But his personality is so shitty. When they were making out and whatever, he's like, oh, I don't think I'll be able to stop myself, even if you tell me no. And I was like, red flag? Hello? But, of course, the maiden and everyone else is like,
oh, you're so hot and sexy. I love your 2 dimples. Of course, we're gonna forgive you.
The main character herself, her name is Poppy. And the only reason why Hawk is so into her is because he finds her unexpected. Literally, I kid you not. I cannot count on how many times that this dude has said to this girl,
oh, I found you so intriguing. You're so unexpected.
And she's just like,
I am? Thank you so much.
okay, Poppy, such a cool character trait. We love to see it. So unexpected. It was just so corny. I could not. Honestly, this whole book felt like a badly written fan fiction of like other books that we read before. Throne of Glass for one. I just could not. So essentially, I did not like this book. I thought it was corny, cringy, catastrophic, just overall bad. However, if you enjoyed it, good for you. 10 out of 10. I really don't care. This is just my opinion, so it is what it is. Because this book was so shockingly bad, I went ahead and borrowed the sequel from the library. I don't know what I was thinking, honestly, because the sequel is just as bad, if not worse, than the first book. Oh my god. I don't know why I'm subjecting myself to read the sequel when I was like, maybe it'll get better, maybe I'll give it a second chance. Y'all, fuck no. And its sequel, I'm like 50% of the way through. I mean, if you really like a book with a lot of angst, a lot of crying, sighing, sneaking looks, and just a lot of horny, heated moments where the main character acts like a child, but she's like 18 years old, and she's just so strong and so unexpected, this book might be for you. So there you have it. I gave this book ultimately, you guessed it, a 1.5 out of 5. The only reason why I'm giving it a 0.5 than just a 1 is because I laughed so hard at basically everything this book had to offer. And the sex scenes, don't get me even started. I skipped through all of them. I was like, I'm not here for it. And this is probably one of the worst, corniest, cringiest heterosexual romance I've ever read. I don't know what to say anymore. Who knows if I end up finishing the second book or if it'll appear on my next wrap-up. You'll have to see. Alright guys, that is pretty much it for all of the books that I've recently read. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys all soon with a new video. I talked about this book in We talked about this book in deep detail and in length with We talked about this book in a live stream. Give you 250. If you want to read a book about if you're down to read 250 pages, if you're down to read a book that's less